Okay. Oh, thanks very much for that. It was a very worthwhile presentation. I apologize for missing the start of it, but I think it was really a good eye-opener for all of us here and a good insight to exactly what's going on. And I have to say it's a credit to put and all the team at the work you're doing out there. So again, thanks for that. So I'm going to turn to members for questions. Just one of our colleagues, Deputy Tobin, apologies. It hopes to be before the end of the meeting as well, but doesn't intend to be here as well. So first of all, Deputy Darragh Cleary.
Thanks, Chairman. Thanks, Owen. That was superb. It's a wake-up call, though, as well. I think we have a habit of believing our own publicity about everything being so great. But a wake-up call, but it finished with some good stats there in terms of what we have to offer. Have you had any engagement with the IDA around their strategy? Why are we not getting the corporate venturing? Why are we not getting that side of the investment when we're getting so much other investment? And secondly, have you had any interaction with Dublin City Council management, new council there, potential opportunity, maybe more open to this than previous councils?
So I'll deal with the engagement, and perhaps Carol could deal with the corporate venturing aspect. In terms of engagement, we have had initial contact with the IDA and we're very enthusiastic. I suppose what Startup Ireland is trying to do is leverage the good supports and services that are out there. So we're very enthusiastic about collaborating with the IDA. In terms of specifically why we're sort of, at the moment, quite low in terms of the corporate venturing, I'll let Carl answer. And then secondly, in respect of Dublin City Council, they will be one of the key attendees at our Creating the Vision for Dublin, and we hope that they will play a full role in that event.
Okay. The corporate venturing side is quite a new approach that large corporations are taking for innovation. Previously, most corporate innovation took place within the business itself, and that they realised isn't solving their innovation gaps. So they've created these corporate venturing units to try and almost buy in innovation and invest in startups and drive that forward. That has mostly taken place in the US, which at the moment is the home of most of those large corporations. But what we can do is we can tap into the great resource that the IDA has developed for us through foreign direct investment. A huge amount of these US corporations are now setting up in Ireland. It's the destination of choice for entry into Europe. And what we can now do is build an environment build an ecosystem where those corporations can bring their corporate venturing arms into Ireland. It's a second wave that will take place, but we need to create the environment to make it happen. And I think that environment needs to incorporate three different areas. And one is around incentivizing those corporations to bring their corporate venturing arms into Ireland. And there can be passive and there can be active incentives. One such incentive could be around the benefit they garner from our corporation tax. Maybe we should look at encouraging them to use a very small percentage of that benefit to reinvest into corporate venturing in Ireland. That can take the form of setting up their own accelerator, investing in existing accelerator, or directly investing in startups that they're interested in. It would help them in terms of solving their innovation gap, but then also be a very good CSR activity for them in terms of their relationship with Ireland. And it could deflect away from what could be perceived as a low corporation tax. The other two areas that we need to focus on to drive it would be one around the founders themselves of these startups. And what's critical is that we don't punish failure. And we do at the moment. We do through income tax rates, through a lack of tax credits. We've assisted farming, we've assisted artists, we've assisted stud farms. Maybe we should look at assisting entrepreneurs. And then the third piece would be around investors. As Owen was correctly saying, that there's a large swell of professional investment firms who are creating a lot of significant funds for investment in early stage companies. But what we're missing in Ireland are the incentives for angel investors. So again, we are not creating the right environment for angel investment. If you take the UK, they have EIS and SEIS where you pretty much have downside protection from an investment. If your investment loses money, you can write off that loss against your income tax. to a maximum of 150k. But that is driving a huge amount of investment for seed and early stage companies. With the investment that's available, it drives more founders into creating their businesses. And then you end up with the corporate venturing tagging onto that to create the great synergy between the three.
Thanks, Carl. I might just, in response to your question, Deputy Cleary, bring Sean in on the obstacles, tax-wise, and disincentives there are to embarking in entrepreneurship at the moment.
So, you touched on it there, Carl. It's not just within our system. We celebrate failure in Ireland. We just like to see somebody it not happen, be that the Kilkenny team or whatever, or Dublin team or whatever. But how do we change that culture to actually say to an entrepreneur, if it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen, just get up and do it again? How do we, that's not just, it's not politics can do that, that's every aspect of our life.
Yeah, well, I suppose Jane here is out there in the community morning and night would have some thoughts on that.
I mean, I think, in respect to that, the community that's starting to build up now, there's different areas that we can, that we're working on at the moment, such as supporting entrepreneurs. I mean, I think over the past 5 days, I probably met with about 6 or 7 different startups, people just getting off the ground, want to know what's out there. And, one of the people in our gallery today was recently at a global community event that supports startups. And by far and above, right now, we've got a fascinating community, set of events, set of ways for people to interact with that and know that there's not so much a safety net, but a lot of people have been through this. We're starting to change that culture. So I think in what we're doing with Startup Ireland in respect of being out amongst the startups, chatting with people, I think it's a multi-temporal approach in respect of from our education systems. As Owen has mentioned about the upcoming day later on in the next few months, I think it's that sea change at one stage, but I think the ability in the community to be able to change the culture is already starting to happen. But again, I think if this is a kind of litmus test of what's possible, then getting, I suppose, your support and help with this will help drive that on.
So Sean, you might talk about the kind of obstacles we discussed.
Sure. As I suppose a 15-year entrepreneur, I see. I actually think in terms of tax code particularly, there's obstacles in facing entrepreneurs that are probably accidental. Right? They have a different image of an entrepreneur in mind, not a struggling 20-something-year-old putting all of his or her savings and possibly the future of the next 10 years of his or her family on the line. So, for instance, entrepreneurs don't benefit from a PAYE tax credit. Right? That's explicitly taken away. That's something you might do to discourage entrepreneurship explicitly, but that's the current situation. Entrepreneurs don't benefit from any protection in terms of say, being able to benefit from social welfare if their venture fails. Right, that's another thing that's explicitly taken away. In terms of CGT, except in the last budget, but several budgets in a row, capital gains tax increased. For an entrepreneur or an angel investor, that is the end game. That's specifically how you get yourself paid, apart from the baseline salary that you take from your own business. So those successive increases, although I'm sure they weren't aimed at entrepreneurs, directly disincentivize entrepreneurs. I think in a lot of these cases, there's some low-hanging fruit that could easily be addressed. And I think the problem is that as entrepreneurs, we're terrible at making our voice heard in terms of policy. And it's because we're working in very small teams with no time and no money. We don't really have time to engage. And from my point of view, that's what Startup Ireland is about. It's about creating that channel so that the policies even the low-hanging fruit policies that could be put into place to dramatically support startups can be communicated.
Thanks, Sean. Deputy Anya Collins.
Thank you, Chair. Owen and your colleagues are very welcome. This is very interesting. Just coincidentally, I'm just back from Tel Aviv. I was on the European Missions for Growth there. So Tel Aviv has been a place I've wanted to visit for quite some time. So when the opportunity presented itself in this committee, I had my hand up first. After reading Startup Nation and so on, and Owen, you're very familiar with the work we're doing down in Cork with the Cork Foundation and trying to get funding and all the rest of it. Just some interesting things on Tel Aviv. Their average age is 29. They all start off there's been 3 years, all the males have been 3 years in the army, the females have been 2. Then they take a half a year usually travelling and a year working before they start college. So there's a very positive attitude there, so taking a chance, and you're absolutely right, they have all these incubation centres. Some of them are in basements of libraries, they're not like high end, they're just there where there's people together and they're collaborating and they're at all ages, they're not just young from what I saw. I mean, there was people in their 50s and their 60s. It wasn't all this image that we have of young college students coming out of there. I met one very interesting guy, well, I met lots of interesting people, but one guy had an elevator program, which I thought was good, and I understand Telefonica have something similar here, whereby they do a 5-month incubation program that's very intensive. And his advice, or his issues were, the hardest thing is to get accreditation and distribution for young startups to kind of get to the next stage. But the way, he obviously is a mediator between the venture capital and the startup. So he kind of incubates them and everybody gets a share, so everybody wins, but it's very clean. The other area was in the universities, they all have companies. So like every university has a company. So if you want to get research done, they actually take a share, but it's actually very clean and upfront, so it might be 2% or 5%. And if the product or if the research turns into being a Google or whatever it is, everybody benefits. Whereas here in Ireland, different universities have different policies, and it seems to be and it takes forever. It can take 18 months to 3 years almost to get any product through the system. So we definitely need to change that. There was an interesting, I don't know if you've come across a guy called Andrew Lynch. He's working in these kind of, it's kind of an incubation centre working with multinationals and small companies, whereby they're doing research together. And another blockage there is the idea of funding. We're the only country in the OECD countries that you cannot draw down European funding unless you are part of an education system. So you have to go through a university to get the money drawn down. Now I believe we are changing that, but it seems to be taking a long time, which is a big issue, because from the point of view of where we're situated, and one of our great strengths is the multinational environment and the small business. And all the multinationals are now outsourcing their research because it's far more effective than they are doing it inside. I just certainly think, I mean, I don't know if you've been to the software one up in St. James's. I don't know what that's called, Damien, you were up there. We were up there together. Yeah, they have about 800 people working up there in different companies, you know.
Yeah.
Digital Hub.
Digital Hub, yeah. So we obviously need more of those places.
Yeah.
And they have to be around. I mean, there has to be basements, places, and libraries that aren't being. I mean, in Tel Aviv,
NAMA has plenty of space.
Well,
so
I have that written down here, so we should definitely look at seeing what we could do there, you know.
Yeah.
But then we need to couple it with the incubation and the right. Because I know down in Cork, we've done it with the Cork County Council. We have incubation centres. But I know in Mill Street, we have one, and it's half empty. We can get startups in there, you know. So it seems to be more of a city,
It is, yeah.
you know, kind of young, vibrant in the middle of the city. It doesn't need to be out in the outskirts either. People want to be in the centre. Venture capital, the 2 to 5 million, that's been a problem for 20 years in Ireland. It's not a problem today. And I think in our own way, we're probably going to have to set up our own venture capital as a state, to kind of see if we can partner with this or do something different, because like we're putting all the money into the early stage investment, but then they get to a stage and they're going to North America.
That's right.
Because the first thing that happens is we want your headquarters there. So I think we need to just find a policy that can do something on that. Angel investors, you'll be glad to know we've done a submission in relation to getting a tax credit for an investment as an angel investor, up to 20 million, so that it cuts off in a year 20 million, so that it's focused, and so that both the entrepreneur and the entrepreneur would have to get approval by the revenue commissioners. Whether it'll happen or not, it's submitted. Seed capital is one of my favourite topics. We need to make it easier. It's around forever. It's never been used, and we just need to make it clean, so that, you know, if you can get your tax back for the last 5 years, and you can just invest that into the share capital, as opposed to all this messing that you have to kind of get around. You have to find the money, then claim it back. And what people don't get is entrepreneurs don't have money. You know, the early stage, young people out of college or whatever, or even not so. Yeah, I totally agree with you with the income tax and with the CGT. The CGT is now 16.5%, as you know, from last budget. But my understanding is that it's still quite complicated. Have you any thoughts on that? Apparently in the UK it's much cleaner. PAYE tax credit, I think the answer to your issue there, Sean, my background is accounting, so I've done a lot of work with small business, is that they believe that as an entrepreneur or as a small business, there's probably more allowances that you can get use of. That's, whether it's unfair or fair, it's been there forever. And the PRSI, that now has changed. You can only get 6 months, even as a PAYE person. After that, it's means tested. I mean, you are entitled to social welfare if you lose your business. The issue is it's mean tested. If it's not mean tested, you can get 6 months is all you're entitled to now. So, and there is a policy change in that. There was some work done on it, so I believe we'll see some change in that in the budget. So I think that's, I don't know what questions were there, but anyway.
Well, I do remember at the presentation by Sean O'Sullivan's Entrepreneurship Forum report, you made some very relevant and comments on the challenges that we face. And I suppose, echoing what Sean said, our goal with Startup Ireland is to take some of those issues and keep raising them and run an annual survey of the startups at each stage of the pipeline, because at each stage you're facing different issues and different challenges, and we will provide a coordinated voice through a survey of establishing the reality on that. Just in respect of Tel Aviv, you might share with me some of your contacts. A number of staff from DIT's Tech Transfer Office and Incubation Centre are joining a fact-finding delegation to Tel Aviv in September, so any introductions you could make?
Yeah, and because we were there with Missions for Growth, we had, like, it was all set up and it was a complete, Missions for Growth is a European initiative.
Great.
I think they're going to China next and then they're going to Turkey. And I'm hoping that they'll come to Ireland. We've invited them from this committee to come here in the first quarter of next year, when they might bring in 150, 160 different companies to meet with entrepreneurs and other businesses and government and access and different. So it's an excellent opportunity.
That'll be great.
I have a whole list of cards that I just need to correlate. I'd be happy to meet you one and go through those.
That'd be fantastic. And just one thing, I'd maybe like to bring Fionnuala in on this point in respect to female entrepreneurship, because that was something that came up at the presentation of the Entrepreneurship Forum report and the challenges we face in respect of increasing the participation.
I just think that it's important to get increased gender diversity on boards. The research has shown that when you have a gender diverse board, you're more capital efficient to the tune of 30%. You achieve 35% higher return on investment, and also you generate 12% higher revenue. So it's all about promoting diversity on boards and getting that, and that's something that Startup Ireland is also advocating for, is getting support networks in there for getting more women involved in entrepreneurship.
Unfortunately, as we look around this room, we're an example of exactly what's happening everywhere else, on both sides of the table, if you see what I get. So, I mean, there is an issue with diversity.
Yeah.
But if it's something that we bring in, it will allow us to be leaders in it and differentiate us from other cities.
There has been a big change in the boards trying to get more women in, but unfortunately there isn't a huge amount of them applying either, But it is an issue around risk and all sorts of issues. Right? Yeah.
Yeah, I think Sean just wanted to come back to you there, Deputy Collins.
Quickly to the capital gains tax issue. The budget did introduce some new measures, but putting my heads together with various other angel investors and entrepreneurs who couldn't figure out how to take advantage of the reductions, which were really to do with how you might offset in terms of future investments having made a windfall. So in realistic terms, we still feel like it's 33% tax for us on capital gains. So
I think it's very clean. It's 16.5%.
in the UK, the scheme as an entrepreneur is that you have a 10 million, the first 10 million of capital gains that you make is taxed at 10%. And after that, regular capital gains kicks in. So there's a specific targeted measure there to encourage people to go off and try and build a business. That's what you'd hope to make in that 1 in 100 chance you actually succeed.
John, most countries have kind of specific targets. Would most countries around allow for this? I mean, we're obviously missing the boat here.
The UK is special, I think, in that it has directly targeted measures specifically to promote innovation and entrepreneurship. But internationally, we have one of the highest capital gains tax rates in the world. I think the third highest.
Can I just ask a question in relation to that? Is it true, and because I've heard this, that there's companies setting up in Ireland, getting the early stage investment benefits, and then they're relocating to the UK?
North, yeah.
To the north.
We've heard of a number of companies, startups that have moved some of their operations to Belfast to avail of the equivalent of our EIIS scheme, because ours is quite difficult. Yeah. And I was chatting to BDO, who used to be the market leader in BES schemes, which was a better scheme, to be honest with you, and the EIS scheme is not
too complicated.
Too complicated. It doesn't suit the investors who are taking the risk, and it doesn't suit the entrepreneurs.
Actually, one of the other interesting things that I learned in Tel Aviv is even, the way we've Enterprise Ireland website, I don't know if anybody got on it, but I mean, you'd need a degree in how to get around the website to understand some of it. But there you just go in and you ask a question. So like we'll say female entrepreneurship, interested in, you kind of maybe put in 2 or 3 things and it throws up all the relevant information that's available for you in that particular sector, diversity, whatever. So maybe that's something we could suggest even, Chair, because it is, I mean, I've tried to get around it and I'm quite familiar with Enterprise Ireland, and it's quite difficult now to mind somebody who's just coming out and starting it, you know.
Deputy Lawler.
EIS, is that a scheme that's designed by a civil servant?
It replaced
And
the
it doesn't have
BES.
any, yeah, but it doesn't have any input from people who will be using it.
There was probably a consultation process gone through, and one of the problems with the BES was that it was excessively property orientated, and we had too many hotels, etc. built. That was the sector based. But the problem was they threw the baby out with the bathwater. We now have an early seed funding instrument which is not used or not drawn down.
It's sector, they widen the sectors on it, but they change the terms to 3 years, and then you have to employ so many people. And
that's right.
I know we're all talking about to create an environment more suitable for entrepreneurs. I'm interested in Killian and like how to create the atmosphere for Killian to go along that route that you're talking about, because that's equally important that we have broaden the base rather than we have to look at that too as well. So what policies can we put in place now that would assist, say, the likes of Killian, or get him on the road to entrepreneurship too as well? Because as I said, once you broaden the base, we're more likely to get more people involved in it. Yeah.
Well, it's kind of like sport, and if you look at the major improvements, because the rugby academies and the GAA taking it to amateur professionalism, the improvement is massive in terms of our rugby teams competing with the best, and our GAA teams producing amazing levels of professionalism and expertise. In terms of Killian, Deputy Lawler, like, for me, my story, I see Senator Quinn has joined us. I was in the same class as Gillian, and Gillian used to talk about the socialisation of her into the business ethos that your family represented. And for me, it was a very similar case where my parents were the perennial triers. They're always trying something new, trying some new business, be it one of the less successful businesses was cleaning chimneys, which my dad used to do in his spare time, or fitting door holes, which went equally badly because one day I took an afternoon off school to go helping him do this door hole fitting, and unfortunately my form master took the same afternoon off, and the first door we knocked on was his, so that was the end of my involvement in that business. They set up hand knitting businesses, loads of different businesses. They were real triers, and I absorbed that kind of through socialization, but that's not going to do it. Like, you're not going to become a global tech hub for any of the ecosystems we want to tackle: food, biopharma, technology, if we continue to rely on a few great role models. We need to move to a situation which is gradually happening. It's glacial, but it's happening. So at the moment, the local enterprise offices have a national competition with a 2 million prize fund for student entrepreneurs. A number of the student bodies in the various universities and institutes of technology are starting to look at trying to run internal incubation programs, and there's a number of student accelerator programs. So Launchpad in Trinity would be an example of that. But it really, Deputy Lawler, is a long-term game. It's the Deputy Colleary talked about how do we change the culture. It's by role models. It's by people having positive experiences. It's by people not being concerned about the downsides. Oh, I'll lose this benefit, or if I... So like in my situation, I remortgaged my house at one stage to make the payroll halfway through the growth of the business. Now, I exited very successfully, but the kind of people who are up for taking those risks have to be encouraged. And we have a country of people who are very innovative and very creative, but we have a culture that doesn't currently reward that. But it can be done. It can be changed.
The excitement's there. Recently we ran an event called Startup Weekend, so it's been running 4 or 5 years globally. And over 54 hours, attendees come in from all different backgrounds, all different age groups, and are trained. And the majority, I think all the panel here, were mentors at that, gave up their time, and people in the balcony as well. By that, we actually ran Europe's largest event to date. 135 people got trained in entrepreneurial endeavours in that respect. I think on the Monday that I took off to try and recover after, working through all that, wandering through town in little coffee shops or little restaurants, there were some of the teams working away on their plans. And I think the thing to remember in this is that, by being able to tap into this group through Startup Ireland, to be able to listen to the voice of what's happening in the community, what people are ready for, the excitement's there. You know, at this stage, we need your support to start pushing this through faster and scale like a startup.
Just a final point on that from me, like entrepreneurship and getting involved in startups, it's too often seen as, oh, you know, I'm not going to be a Mick O'Leary. Like, that's not the question here. Like, the question is getting involved in startups, possibly not as the lead entrepreneur, but working with a startup, working with a small team. It's amazing what you learn. And it's very much like a sport. Entrepreneurship is a learning by doing activity. You can read any amount of books, but real entrepreneurship and the skills you learn are by doing it and being in a team that is doing it. It's muscle memory, and that's what we lack at the moment in Ireland. We're too much in terms of academic approach to a lot of the things that we try and take on, and not enough of the kind of sporting approach. Let's perfect it by doing it.
We should be pushing more for the transition years stuff in there, and even below that at the primary school level. If we had, I know Intel are involved in stuff at primary school level for young innovators too as well. So it's something that we should be doing, pushing as from this committee, but nationally too as well. That's where we build the base. It's about building the base.
Absolutely. I think Fionnuala would like to say something.
Just further to that, I think definitely you need to get early involvement. In my own personal experience, both my parents worked in the public sector, so they would be quite risk averse, and their level of understanding and support was to what their experience was. Whereas if I had gone in early, spent some time as a student, either in secondary school or in third level, I would have seen a lot more about how things work and how things don't work. And that also helps the cultural change towards acceptance that sometimes it doesn't work out. And I think a lot of the time people are afraid of the failures because they just haven't seen enough of them and it isn't socially acceptable. And that change will come as you get more exposure to it, and it won't be such a gossipy thing or something they'd be afraid of.
Before we move to John Lyons, I'm so keen to say, but the excitement is there and interest is there. I mean, the point is proven on a Sunday night from Dragon's Den, 800,000 people watch it, and yet we have a culture that doesn't favour entrepreneurship, and yes, there's interest there, but it's the getting involved is the next step, and it's not getting people, you know. So.
Yeah, in a funny kind of way, I'm not a fan of the Dragon's Den model, Chairman, because again, it sort of sets it up as a kind of an adversarial, high stakes, high tension. You know, the person who doesn't get funding goes away with their tail in their legs. That's not really the model we want. We want it to be like sport. Participation is key, and learning by doing is key. It's not a winner takes all situation. So while Dragon's Den does raise the agenda, it kind of makes, you know.
Step. Okay. Yeah. No, my point was that the numbers that watch it. I mean, I'm sure.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. But again, we're kind of the lurkers who, you know, in Ireland, we've all got ideas. You know, we can beat the band with ideas. The difference in Tel Aviv, as Deputy Collins will tell you, is they're the doers. Like, so they'll have an idea in the morning, and by lunchtime they're out there doing it. We'll have an idea in the morning, and then we'll go out to the pub with our friends and discuss it in the evening, and then we'll have to talk about it again on the Friday, and then the following week we'll say, do you ever do anything about that idea? It's just not the right time.
Yeah, skill led. Deputy John Lyons.
Look, there's a lot of enthusiasm here today. You can really see it, and it's great. You mentioned some of the policies that probably hinder, you know, I suppose the growth of what you hope to achieve by 2020 in Ireland as a global tech startup hub. What sort of policies have we introduced over the last 3 years? Like, I suppose vis-a-vis the action plan for jobs, which we've had 2 stages of so far, that might have actually gone to supporting the type of environment that you have. Just to see, you know, are we doing things that are on the right path? Of course, there are lots of things that we're not doing that we possibly need to do, and you've outlined some of those. But, you know, if there's anything there that we've done that's saying, look, more of that, please. And you mentioned, you know, the hot desking just as one issue of many that you mentioned there. What practical things, you know, could be done in a very short span? You mentioned something like perhaps some of, you know, the properties in NAMA, perhaps. You know, what very, you know, immediate practical solutions could go a long, long way to begin to, you know, step up, creating that environment you're hoping to achieve by 2020?
Okay, Deputy Lyons, thank you for the question. I suppose I'll deal with my own personal direct experience in terms of the action plan for jobs. And I'm the program manager at New Frontiers in Dublin Institute of Technology, and this is a fantastic program. Like, when I was building Navarra Technology in the front bedroom of my house, or when we were building the family jewellery business, there were no programs like this available. Like, Ireland, in terms of programs and an availability of support, is one of the best countries in the world to start a business. There are obstacles, there are issues taken. However, at the same time, there are amazing supports out there. In terms of the New Frontiers program, now it's a national brand, it's coordinated, there's an increasingly dense network of connections evolving from that. It's a really, really good program. In terms of another thing that's emerged from the Action Plan for Jobs, I would say that the Job Bridge program has been extremely good. The great thing about the Job Bridge program, back to my learning by doing, instead of talking about it or learning academically about it, what Job Bridge does is it helps give the skills to people. And I know there are cases in the media which are not this case. However, in my personal experience and working with the startups going through our incubator and working with a number of Job Bridge interns myself, it's been a fantastic way to help give them the skills and to help us deliver on more ambitious goals. That would be my personal experience of what the government has done well and done right in the last couple of years. I'll put it out to the rest of the group for any thoughts they have. Yep.
Could I just talk about the hot desking piece, Deputy Lyons? In Wyra, we created sorry if I explain, actually, Deputy Collins, Wyra is the Telefonica accelerator, yeah. So we opened 2 years ago. By the end of the summer, we'll have invested and accelerated 31 startups in Ireland, and a mix from a whole range of different countries. So obviously the majority are Irish founders, but we have founders from Romania, New Zealand, the US, Italy, Canada, Mexico. There's a whole range of different founders who are coming into Ireland. So they're seeing the opportunities of being in Ireland. Enterprise Ireland are helping. They have a number of different funding solutions for startups, from CFF for female founders, CSF for startups, for early seed startups, and then they have their follow-on HPSU fund, which is match funding up to 250k. So Enterprise Ireland are certainly playing a role as well. But in respect to the hot desking, in Wyra last year we created a new area where we can house, about 20 to 25 new individuals who are creating businesses. We don't charge for that. We meet them, we see, are we interested in those businesses, and they come in and they work for free. We don't charge them a penny. And what that shows to me is literally within a month of opening that, we were full. So that capacity was taken up pretty much instantly. So the demand for hot desking, the demand for access to a community and a network is crucial. And in Spain, Telefonica has created a new business called Open Futures. And what they're doing is they're working with regional councils, so the equivalent of our county councils, and they're identifying office space which is available. And Telefonica then work with that county council to turn it into an office environment at the cost of the county council, but then Telefonica will work with that county council to provide the mentoring, the facilities, the access to markets, things like that. And that is a model I think that could work here. Maybe not with Telefonica, but certainly with some of the other corporates and corporations coming in from the US and Irish corporations. So I think there are definitely options there in terms of fulfilling that need for space and community, which is the critical element.
Thanks.
Chairman, I just apologise because I'm going to run away again, having been tied up with something else, but something else popped up. I just want to congratulate you on it. I had two pieces of experience, one with the Leaving Cert applied, and the other with the transition year. And it just seems to me that we can learn a huge amount and instill a huge amount of enthusiasm in that age group if we can teach them that they can do it. Leaving Cert applied is not all that successful at the moment, but in as much as those who joined haven't had the support I think that they need. But what it measures are your talents, your abilities, your skills, your intelligences, other than the academic ones. And it's just a joy to see somebody who's qualified, who is regarded at the age of 5 or 6 or 7 as being quite poor, and therefore they were at the back of the class and told to keep quiet. And by the time they get to 15, 16, they're really isolated. And then suddenly discover, because they're measuring their other abilities, and suddenly discover that these people have confidence And if there's one thing it is, it's confidence. Somebody is a great orator, somebody else is a great cook, somebody else is a great gardener, but they suddenly found that the rest of the class are able to say to them, yeah, you can do it. And once they get confidence, they can do a lot. So it seems to me that that's one of the things we've got to do, perhaps at the education end of it, but also in business as well. We should find some way of being able to give youngsters confidence so that they feel, yeah, as Fionnuala says, you're not afraid of failure. You say, no, it's okay to fail, but make sure you stand up and do it again. Yeah. But well done your stories. I'm really feeling guilty about one of these days where 3 or 4 things are happening at the one time.
I'll just take Deputy Michael Conlon as well.
Sure, thanks. Yeah, I'd like to agree with Senator Curtis, his remarks about the Leaving Cert applied. You know, it's much underrated, and it's far too little known as well in the educational field. But in relation to the presentation, I thought it was very compelling and very provocative. The initial presentation you made. A very brief question, just in the scenario that you're sketching out there for Dublin. I was just wondering where you rate or where you would place the digital hub, for example. Is it a kind of a signpost on a roadmap for Dublin, or where you evaluate it in terms of its presence in the city? As an exemplar, or is it? Do you think it's an example that we should be looking towards in terms of replicating?
The Activating Dublin report identified a number of clusters in the immediate city centre. So what's referred to as Silicon Docks, which would be where Facebook and Google have their offices as one hub, and the other hub they clearly would identify as up towards James's Gate, NDRC, Digital Hub, etc. Yeah. And it's been a great success in doing what it does. How things will go forward in terms of, there will be a lot of change in the next number of years. Dublin Institute of Technology will be consolidating a huge campus over the next 5 to 10 years of 22,000 students at Grange Gorman. We'll have other changes in terms of DIT becoming the technological university for Dublin, having met the various criteria set for that. So there will be a lot changing in the city landscape over the next 5 years. How, that's beyond me to comment on where any individual cluster will fit within that, Deputy.
May I try?
Sure.
I think what we're seeing actually is the vacant office space above all of the retail in the city centre beginning to fill up with startups. So you have the NDRC and Digital Hub, 2 kilometres one way, Silicon Docks 2 kilometres the other way, and in between, startups taking advantage of phenomenally low rents to live on streets or work on streets, sometimes the same, that I would normally just see on the Dublin Monopoly board. Right, we're on Dawson Street. I couldn't have done that in the past. And by being able to be in the city centre, it creates these serendipitous opportunities where you suddenly find that there's a startup culture. If I go to the coffee shop in the corner of Molesworth Street and Dawson Street there, I know I'll bump into 2 or 3 other people running startups. And I think that's where culture changes, when you get that density in one location. And for me, it's the city centre right now.
I'd echo what Shauna said there. My company, Novara Technology, we were on North Earl Street in a very dilapidated old building that used to have a hairdresser on one floor, bookies on another floor, and a dress alteration, etc. on the top floor. And we took it over and we gradually improved it floor by floor by floor. By the time we sold the company, it was a fantastic facility. So I remember years ago there was that over the shop incentive scheme. It would make great sense if around the digital hub and near NDRC, if that area between there and down to the Docklands there were incentives made for, again, over the shop type. Like, it's scandalous how many units are left idle and boarded up around the city centre.
There in the 80s and the 90s, due over to Shallow. Yeah.
It's something we're discussing last week, the whole city centre and town centres as well, how to get them going again. So no matter where it starts, to revive a town centre or a city centre, so that's something we can certainly work on. Phil, you want to come in there? Sorry.
It's just in relation to the hot desking, something Deputy Collins mentioned earlier on about a half-empty building. It's sometimes the incubation centres tend to be on the outskirts of town or location universities, and a lot of the time you're trying to meet with VCs, with angel investors, and have really professional meetings, and look, you don't want to make it difficult for them. If it's a trip into the city centre, they'll be a lot more accommodating to come in and meet you, and it also allows for somebody to bump into them if they're in the same building, and it's again facilitating the network in the startup community, and the networking is quite strong in Dublin, so it's something that we should be leveraging off more.
It's one thing our company, sorry, Minister Media, just to build on that, as the guys said with corporate venturing that we launched this week, is an initiative called Start Local, which is we're providing free office space for 6 months to startups in the particular area that we're in, and the idea there is that the payback is the bounce that we get in our community within our office. So the guys will chat more. They'll learn more from that. I suppose it's a meeting of cultures, which I saw recently in the downtown area of Las Vegas, where a guy called Tony Shea has put $50 million into a fund to build up office space, support startups. He's bought old casinos, wiped out the casinos, made co-working spaces there. There's some really interesting, quick things that we can do. And I think giving space, like you've mentioned Deputy Lyons and Deputy Collins about NAMA, these building blocks that are there, I think, because they're city centre locations, it actually makes more sense to unlock those first. They'll bring more people, they'll spend more money, they'll create more jobs. So I think in that respect, it'd be interesting to see what could be done in that field.
You're saying if we make the accommodation available, it'll be filled a bit like it'll happen.
Yeah.
Can I just say, I'm going to wrap up with a couple of final comments from yourselves as well. The overall vision, I guess from me it's achievable. I've no doubt about that. I think that's you all believe that. Have we an idea of the cost of what, for government to back this and to really go after this in a big way? Do you have potential costs on your head, or do you not?
So at a very high level, I had an MBA group over from Colorado, the home of Brad Feld's startup communities, and they were helping looking at some of the elements of this. So like if you look at that competition run internationally, the startup gathering, let's call it as a working title, it doesn't have to be that expensive. Like we figured out that the Boston Mass Challenge, which brings 800 startups to Boston, probably costs about $1.5 million per annum to run. In terms of incubation facilities, the model internationally in a lot of locations is they are privately funded. Or if we really want to kickstart that space, looking at publicly, privately funded vehicles. So again, it could be very much cost neutral to the Exchequer. Then in terms of incentivizing accelerators, as Carl identified, so if you're looking at, say, attaching possibly R&D tax credits to work they're doing on a vertical accelerator or some other incentives like that, or if you said, for example, because we're very keen on the idea of the startup being in the same building as the parent company, so you have those casual conversations and you get to chat and you get through all those gatekeepers that typically stop you getting that big corporate sale. What if the Dublin City Council made it rates free on the floor where you're putting the accelerator for a number of years? So there would be the cost side, the incentives. However, the benefit side in terms of the jobs, the PAYE, again, look at the scale of what the IFSC has achieved. So a lot of what we're talking about would be neutral at worst, but worse, however we would see it, actually would have a substantial benefit to the Exchequer over time. And if you even look at a simple example, Mark Little selling Storyful, he's made it quite public that of the 20+ million consideration, 6 million went to the Irish Exchequer because that startup was located here. So imagine if you had 100 of those exits. Like in Israel, they raise 3 billion VC money per annum. Imagine the impact of the exits of those successful sales would have to our Exchequer.
Okay. Any concluding comments, members? Okay. We have a minute.
Yes. On the incubation space. I totally agree. I think it has to be in the cities. We've tried it in a country location and it hasn't worked because you need the people and you need whatever. The rates issue is a problem. The council don't set the rates; it's the rates commission. So we're changing that. There's legislation coming through. So once the council can make the decision, they can probably look at things more favourably in that. At the moment, they only collect the rates. So that bill will hopefully be through the House before the end of the year, which will make that a bit more open. But yeah, I think there's definitely something we could be able to do there, Chairman, is to look at...
No, in terms of process, you've been here today, we've given a lot of food for thought, a lot of information, a lot of ideas we need to go and work on. As a committee, we meet again every week, so we'll meet next week and we discuss then what we're going to do with what you said today. I'm conscious that the budget's coming up, so we certainly have an influence on that, and we'll try to make some recommendations directly to the Minister and relevant ministers on that. But as a committee, we will discuss what we hear from you today as well. We might decide to take this on, and we will probably decide to do a bit more work in this area, and maybe have a few more meetings about it, so we will engage with you on that. But certainly, as chairman, I'm sure some members will attend on October the 10th for definite. But we'll work with you maybe over a couple of months on this, and there's others as well. So it's an area we'll certainly take on.
Google, which is quite close.
No, that's no problem at all.
The budget process.
Yeah.
As well.
You could.
Yeah,
And put together some of the ideas, keep them simple, so they're
Absolutely.
achievable rather than
The 1, 2, 3.
aspirations.
Said it's gone in.
Yeah,
And Sean,
absolutely,
pay for
yeah.
tax review.
Yeah.
I think it will come in handy.
And what we'd ask, Chair, is perhaps the opportunity to come back in 6 months' time and update you on the progress, so
Yeah.
it becomes part of the process of change. And that will help
Absolutely.
become a focal point for us.
I think we might probably take a decision in the autumn to focus on startups as a whole area.
Great.
Once we've done all the reports in the last year gone by, so we might
That would be-
do a total area on it.
That would be
Any
fantastic.
concluding comments, Carol, or anyone wants to add to it? No, we're happy enough.
Well, I'd just like to say, appreciate the committee's time, and I hope we've communicated the scale of the vision that's possible and is achievable. And there's a group of very determined people in front of you here today on behalf of Startup Ireland, and we will see this through, but we really need your help.
Okay, listen, thanks for that, and thanks for today, that's appreciated. We're going to adjourn now for about a minute, allow the Minister to suspend for a minute until our second group take their seats. Thanks, guys. Yeah, Minister.